Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world, listening, watching, or whatever, to our podcast. This is the Asset Academy podcast. I'm here with Steve Kelsey. Hello, Steve. How are you?
Afternoon, Simon. Very good. Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Thank you for joining me. Now, Steve is an Asset Academy student as well as a coach and trainer. He's a property investor and entrepreneur and runs a letting agent in his chosen investment area. And that's what we're talking about today. Your investment area and how to choose it. Not yours, Steve, obviously.
Okay.
How the
I've already done that, yeah.
choose their area. It's fair to say it depends on an awful lot of factors, doesn't it? And we're going to run through a number of key points for people to consider.
Yeah.
But first of all, why don't you tell me the three key areas that we're going to look at so that you can really sort of hammer down on the detail.
Okay. Well, I guess when we're looking at which area to invest in, there's quite a lot of research that we can do in the early stages online. That's one of the benefits of the modern era. We can do a lot of digging using various websites. So I would say if we split it into three parts, then the first part would be internet research, looking at the area or areas nearby. Well, let's go back a little stage. I think an ideal investment area is one that you don't have to travel too far to in an ideal world, one where there's enough stock to buy for the strategy, and that's something else we could talk about maybe is strategy, because your investment area will be driven by the strategy that you're looking at. But when we're looking at an area, the first thing is to look at a couple of things. The economics of the area is important. So obviously, you're looking for people to rent your properties, to buy your properties. They need money. So understanding what the economy is like in that area. What's the economy made up of? Is it a lot of industrial work and engineering work? Is it city office-based work? What's the makeup of the economy within the area? And then you can understand what drives demand for employment if you understand the economy in the area. And the second thing is to understand a little bit about the people in the area. So the population, the demographics. Is it a growing population, shrinking? What's the typical age of a population, average income, families, single people, makeup, that kind of thing. So that would be my first stage. Second stage, again, internet research, now looking at the properties within an area. What's the highest demand for properties? What kind of properties give you the best returns? So we're looking at, again, driven by your strategy. Is it two-bedroom properties, three-bedroom properties? Is it terrace houses, detached houses? What are you looking for? What is in demand in the area and what's driving the demand? And then once you've really got a good handle of those and you're feeling confident that you've found an area that will work for your strategy, because that's what we're doing. We're trying to find out which area will work for my strategy. Then you can start to visit the area to confirm with local experts, agents, things like that, that your findings are right, and they'll have local knowledge that you don't have and fill in some of the gaps as well. And you can also start to build your power team at that point. So there are the three separate blocks that you would build on.
So before you deep dive and really examine a specific area, how do you actually choose the area that you're going to invest? Because let's say you live in, I don't know, Chelmsford in Essex, and you want to invest somewhere. It might be that it's not quite right immediately close to you. But how do you decide to invest locally, or say an hour away or 4 hours away? What sort of things? Because it depends, and it's different for every individual, isn't it? What are the sort of, how do you say, choose 5 or 6 different areas to start
to go and investigate?
Yeah.
No, it's a really important question, and that's where it all starts, I guess. And I guess with any investment class, whether it's property or I don't know if you're investing into the stock market, the first thing that you consider is why are you doing it in the first place? So what are your objectives? What's your reason? What are you trying to achieve in terms of income generation that you're trying to achieve? What are your long-term goals as well? And because obviously different parts of the country have different levels of return on investment for your money, and different strategies as well. So it will start with understanding your own objectives and the amount of capital that you have to start with, obviously. So there's the two things to consider there, but also travel time and convenience. So in an ideal world, you'd be investing in property within, let's say, an hour of where you live. That would be perfect, because then you can visit your investment area quite easily on a fairly regular basis. If, however, you are in Essex, as you say. You're looking at a buy-to-let strategy. You're thinking about where the highest return on investment is. Let's use the term yield for now. Where are the highest yielding areas? It's not going to be in Essex. If you've got access to a relatively limited amount of capital to start with, you're probably wanting to travel, further towards the Midlands or the north of England. So that's good in terms of your income generation and your return on investment. However, there are obviously negatives in terms of the travel and not having contacts in an area and things like that. So they're the things to weigh up. What are the practicalities of investing at distance versus nearer to home? What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? And
And I
you've
would
just got to weigh them up, really.
And I'd say with if you are investing at a distance, time is going to be a critical factor, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because obviously you've got to travel there,
yeah,
and then you need to spend time in the area and then travel back. If let's say an individual's only got one day every couple of
yes.
weeks, or less, one day every month, they're really going to have to spend a lot more time doing desktop research. Would that be
I
fair to
think
say?
so. And look, a lot of people do. We have a lot of Asset Academy
Mm,
investors that are London based or Southeast based, and they do travel around the country and invest all over the place, and they do that really successfully. But you're quite right. If that's going to be the way you approach it, then it simply means you need to put a bit more time and effort into planning what you're doing. So typically, you would visit your investment area maybe every couple of weeks, every 3 weeks, and but just make sure you have plenty to do when you get there. So you're going to do lots of viewings, have lots of meetings, and really maximise what you get out of your trips. And it doesn't take more than a half a dozen trips to an investment area, intense visits, to really start to get to know the area and to make some good contacts. So it's nothing to fear,
mm,
but it is an obstacle to overcome for some people at the beginning.
mm. I mean, I'm not going to sort of make recommendations, but some people like to spend a day or two at a time. I mean, they might do, go up there, do as much as they can in the daytime, spend the night, and then maybe have another morning and be back for tea. Um,
Indeed, yeah,
yeah, but again,
long long
it's
days.
down to time commitment, how much time you can commit
Time.
to doing that, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, you're trying to get the most out of your time, and time. We're running a business here, so productivity. I guess you could consider it as productivity, and getting the best out of your time is really important, and it's beneficial if you get used to being very productive and time efficient. That's going to kick on into the rest of your business as well.
Time and what they want to get out of it. I mean, that can also cover many things. It could be that they just want to create a sufficient pot for the future, or,
Yeah.
a pension fund. Let's say some people want to completely replace their income, don't they? And,
Yes.
and say see you later to the boss at some point in the relatively near future. Others, it's the side hustle. They might love their job and want to stay in it. I was chatting with one of our guys, one of our investors in Wales, and he's a weather presenter on the radio. He
All
loves
right.
his job and he doesn't imagine giving it up. But he said property is there for the future and also as an added extra income at the moment. So
That's right. Yeah.
there's lots of different objectives that an individual will have.
And that's the nice
I mean,
thing,
we
isn't it?
mentioned
Isn't that a nice thing that with
absolutely.
property you can achieve whatever you want? So you're quite right. If your objective
Mm,
is to generate £1,000 a month within the next 3 or 4 years, that's very easily done. A handful of buy to lets on a
mhm.
steady pace is no problem. However, if you have an objective to generate several £1,000s a month within the next 2, 3, 4 years, then that's when you have to start looking at multiple strategies and right, what kind of strategies are going to generate the income. And maybe if you're pursuing multiple strategies, then your area research will target different areas for different strategies.
So let's think then about choosing a number of areas to do, for want of a better phrase, a broad brush across it. I'm going to play sort of the new investor, if you
Yeah.
like, and ask you a number of typical questions that we get coming through. So I live in the southeast. I want to go and invest in buy to lets. Where do I start? I
Mm.
mean, I've got a day every third week that I can commit to going and visiting an area. How do I decide on which area to go and visit?
Yeah, that's a really good starting point. So, what I recommend to people is if you have a look on a map at where you live, and then sort of draw a radius around a circle around where you live. within an hour. Where can you reach within an hour of where you live to start with, and have a look at the towns and cities within an hour of where you are. Are any of those towns familiar to you? Do you know a little bit about them already? Do you know, are any of those places stick out in your mind for good economic growth? They've been linked with inward investment, capital investment on infrastructure projects, anywhere looking really good like that? Or are there any of those areas that you know or you've heard of that are really, maybe not great places to live, or they're on the decline maybe? And then you could look at start with what places are you familiar with further afield, or would you feel comfortable travelling to? So that's one way to start, and then we start to
And
look at
that's really useful, isn't it? If it's familiar to you.
yeah.
I mean, lots of people, huge chunks of the population don't always live where they grew up. I mean, my first area that I looked at was where I actually grew up in northeast Lincolnshire, and because I knew the dodgy parts of town. And funnily enough, as I did more research, I realised most of the town was quite dodgy. But there we go. So familiarity is really a key point, and very useful, isn't it?
Yeah, and it just helps with the comfort level as well. You feel more comfortable about researching those areas, and then what we start to do is to look at the what we call the fundamentals within an area, the things that drive high demand, because everything in business is driven by demand. Where is the demand for the products and services that we want to offer? Again, going back to your strategy, so we have to look for areas where there's high levels of population, because the more people there are, for want of a better word, crammed into an area, then the higher the demand for various types of accommodation. If your strategy is HMOs and you're looking at the student market, then you're obviously going to be looking at university towns. If your strategy is for professional families, then you might be looking at the suburbs of major cities rather than in the centre of cities. Centres of big towns and cities tend to be apartments, younger people wanting to be close to work and close to the nighttime economy. So again, a lot of this reflects the strategy. The other thing, Simon, is affordability. So if you think about buying any kind of a property in the southeast of England, we were talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds. Whereas if you've got a little bit of money to invest in a property, you want to get the most out of it. So let's say in your search, if you're looking for fairly standard buy-to-lets, you might be looking for areas where we can frequently buy a property for, I don't know, within £150,000, let's say, for example.
Okay.
So that's easy to analyse online, looking at properties in different towns and cities and having a look at average house prices. Because the more affordable a property is, then it's the more easily we can purchase, and the more affordable the rent's going to be for the tenants. So we're aiming at the broadest part of the market to give us the best chance.
And obviously, the amount of property costs compared to the rental values are absolutely linked 100%. There's no point buying a £300,000 house and renting it for £650
Correct,
a month, is
correct,
there?
yeah. And again, that's something else we do in our research. And so we can just look generally, it's a crude measure, but we can look at average yields in different areas. Average yield throughout the UK, 6%. So as you're doing your research, you can look at different property types in different areas and work out the average yield on those. And if they're above 6%, that's a good indicator that it might be an area of high demand where things work. Of course, with the tools that we have at our disposal as professional investors, the things that we learn through Asset Academy, the 6% yield is not our return on investment. We use our skills to drive our returns up to obviously much higher than that. But that's a crude, broad indicator of what you might look for.
Okay, so we've looked at about an hour away. It doesn't seem to work. What next? What?
Then we just keep looking. So let's try an hour and a half away again.
Okay.
Just that basic. So it doesn't have to take hours. We can just look on a map, look online, and start to look a little bit further away. Major towns and cities. Have a look at house prices and yields in the area. Have a little glance at the economic data. The types of industry in different areas, and just continue your research until you get to somewhere that really works. We're quite fortunate that we live on a small island. They say we're within 70 miles of the coast wherever you are. So realistically, you shouldn't have to go too far to find a good area.
Yeah, and Stock available is also a key factor. If there's only three houses for sale, we're not going to do much good, are we?
Correct. Yeah. Again, that's something that we'll look at supply and demand, and that's driven by market forces, and property cycles. So there are some times when there are lots of properties on the market, and other times when there are fewer. Obviously, the fewer properties are on the market, the higher the prices are, and that's where other skills come into play, which we're not really going to talk about today, and things like direct to vendor marketing. How can you access potential property investments that are not advertised for sale? So that's a whole different thing. But yeah, you're quite right. We have to find areas where there's plenty of stock available, and you can
And
within your research. Again, that's part of your household research is looking at when you're analysing an area, how many two-bedroom properties are on the market at any one time, how many three-bedroom properties, how many four-bedroom properties, and then you can identify where the stock's more readily available.
and sort of on a side note as well, just because there's no stock available, you it, don't just discount that area forever. It might be, like you say, it's in the midst of a cycle and it might come back. I know there are lots of investors who have more than one area, so it's something to sort of keep in mind, isn't it? That you can revisit an area if it doesn't work for you right then.
Absolutely. Once you've got the knowledge of how to do this research, then you can just research any area at any time.
So we found then I don't know, we have to travel now a couple of hours. We've got two, three, four, maybe five areas that are looking good. How
Yeah.
do we then narrow it down to decide, right, I'm actually physically going to go and visit that place and start doing some real, on the ground, boots on the ground investigation?
Yeah. Okay. So if you've got five areas that look as though they work, then well, two things. You could go and visit all five and find out a little bit more about them, or you could simply decide, well, which two of those five look the best in terms of potential yields, house prices to purchase, travel accessibility. What's the easiest place to get to by road? Usually driving. So try and isolate a couple of those areas that you're going to go and visit. I mean, you could visit all five, but you're quite right. If you can, which two look the most favourable? So out of all the different elements that you've been researching, which two tick most of the boxes the best?
And is this then where the three sections that you highlighted at the beginning come into play, or are we still sort of a little bit less detailed in our research at this point?
It's still a little bit less detailed, but as each stage goes along, we're looking at a little bit more detail and a little bit more detail. So if we do have the five areas that we think potentially would be good, obviously we've got to try and narrow that down. Um, so we're just trying to, if we have a tick box for each of them, which area has the lowest average house prices that we want to buy, or which area may have the greatest potential for development. If you hear announcements on the news like HS2, and who knows whether that'll happen, but any major infrastructure projects can usually be a stimulus for development in an area. So, if you're inclined to want to take a little bit of a punt sometimes and think, well, that's going to add a lot of value to the area, then that's something that you could follow as well. But yeah, try and identify a couple of areas to start with for your main investment strategy.
Development is actually something a lot of investors look for, isn't it? How an area is going to develop. I mean, today that we're recording this was the 2021 autumn budget, and the Chancellor announced all sorts of funding in what they call the Levelling Up programme, and he very joyously told various different constituencies they were getting a whole bunch of funding for different infrastructure and community space and all sorts of things. So development, I mean, and you can get really in depth looking at development. I mean, there's the development plan from the local council.
That's right.
That's getting very technical, isn't it?
It is, but you don't have to go into too much detail. But you're absolutely right. So every local authority throughout the country has a remit to have a development plan, a unitary development plan, a local development plan. That's part of their remit from government to say how are they going to continue to improve and develop the area. So that, excuse me. So they will have plans in there, usually sort of medium to long term plans about how they want to attract inward investment from companies and bring new employment in the area, what infrastructure investment they're going to make on roads and rail and connectivity, as they call it. Housing, they'll be quite specific within there about what the housing demands and needs are of the area. And these are really useful when you think about it. The local authorities spend an inordinate amount of time and effort and money to find this research, this data. And this is exactly the kind of data that we want to use as well, because these are the things that drive demand for housing. So if there's a lot of development going on in an area, new employers coming in, you can. There are several really good examples. Amazon over the last few years has employed tens of thousands of people, and so whenever there's a big Amazon department, a warehouse that comes up, I don't know how many people they employ, 5, 6, 7,000 in each one maybe. Then
Mm.
you suddenly find an influx of people into the area, and the demand for housing goes up as well. So they're really good, and we just follow big business as well. If you think about any major company or a business that's coming into an area, they spend a lot of time and effort researching as well. Or even high street shops. Starbucks, for example, will not open up in an area until they've done thorough market research. So we can use all of their research to determine what's going to benefit us, and that's really what the online research is.
Funny you mentioned that Starbucks research that they do. I once heard of an investor who used to follow what Costa was doing
Yes.
for a similar reason.
Yeah.
You know, if the investor was looking for an up and coming area, if they'd heard Costa was our stores that are opening, because they advertise, the stores that they're likely to open, they would start looking and thinking, right, that this has become a desirable area that's up and coming. It's going to be worth me, buying some property here. So it's
That's
funny you
right.
mentioned that. Now we've got an area decided, a town, let's say, and really need to decide, is this going to work?
Yes.
Is this where the three main points that you brought up at the beginning come into it?
Yes. So
So I've
that.
decided. So here I am. I don't personally live in Essex, but I'm the investor. I live in Essex,
Yes.
and I've decided Nuneaton's going to work for me.
Yes.
Now, what do I? What? So what? How do we really drill down and make sure that that town is going to work for me?
Good question. And that's the final part. So now you're at the stage of just confirming what you've discovered through your research, and the research should be fairly robust. There's a lot of good stuff out there, but we now need to confirm it. Have I got my assumptions right? And the only way we can really find that out is by going to the area on a visit and speaking to the local professionals. So the professionals
Okay.
being the people that would help us within the housing market, letting agents, for example, a classic one. So, because within your research, not only will you find a lot of information, but you'll also raise a lot of questions that you can't find answers to online. So, by visiting the area, you can really start to see for yourself what it's like. And of course, not every street, not every part of every area is great. Your online research is just for the area. Now you can visit the area and to start to say, okay, well, which parts of Nuneaton are good for my strategy? HMO strategy, buy to let, whatever it is you're looking at. And so we typically start by visiting some letting agents in the area. They're responsible for managing properties within the area for rental. So it stands to reason that they're going to have the best knowledge on the market, the local market. What is really in demand? So you've done your research that suggests that 3-bedroom family homes in this part of Nuneaton seem to be in high demand. Is that
By the
correct?
way, can I just say, Steve, this is not investment advice. We are not saying Nuneaton is a good area. We're
No,
just using it as an example.
your example, Simon. So yeah, so you're letting a letting agent within the area will confirm um, or contradict what you've found out through your online, and then also add stuff to it as well that can be really more specific. So they can say, so when I go to a letting agent for the very first time in an area, I'll ask them to tell me about the area. I'll ask them to identify specifically which parts are in most demand, and they'll usually be able to take a little map and draw usually a cluster of streets. They might say, well, this part of town is in high demand at the minute. We've always got people looking to rent in there. And they can tell you where not to invest as well. So they'll say, don't bring us any houses in this part of town.
That was
So
my next
yeah,
question. Do you ask them where not
where
to go?
not to invest. Yeah,
Yeah.
and if you ask 2 or 3 letting agents the same things, you'll start to see the same answers coming out. And that's when you know you've got your information right. And letting agents are not going to give you false information. They're going to be looking for your business. And that's another thing that you can do is when you're visiting an area, you're not just confirming the data that you've already researched, but you're trying to find out, okay, well, I'm going to have to work with some professionals in this area anyway. It gives you a chance to check them out and to see if you fancy working with those particular agents.
Your personal budget will also dictate as well, won't it? What the kind of property you're going to be buying, and that might also dictate how far from where you live. Just taking it back a step, how
Yeah,
far you have to travel um, to find your investment area.
yeah, yeah,
If you've only got the capability of buying an £80,000 property, you're not going to get it in any of the southeastern or even a lot of the some of the Midlands sort
yeah.
of areas as well. So you might find yourself going north, northwest, northeast, Yorkshire, or somewhere
Yeah.
even further,
That's right. We're finding
Scotland.
we're doing the online research to understand which
Mm,
areas will work for our strategy and within our budget. You're quite right. And I
mm,
mentioned before, look for areas. If you're a beginner and you're looking for buy to let, you're probably looking for areas where you can buy properties for 100 to 150,000. You've also got the added advantage if you can buy less than 125,000. We've got less of a stamp duty uh, uh, put on us as well, less of a stamp
mm,
duty cost
mm,
that we have to pay. So lots of
mm.
advantages to the lower value houses, but you do have to
Yeah.
travel to find them.
And locally, you've spoken to the agent. Who else are good people to speak to get information? I'm thinking people who live in an area would be worthwhile.
People who live in the area are really good. So if you're visiting your area and you go out for lunch, you might go in a paper shop so you can talk to the news agent, the local news agent. Um, just in casual conversation, you can say, "Oh, I'm not from the area. I'm looking to buy a property in the area." You don't even have to say as an investor, you say, "I'm looking to buy property in the area." And
Mm,
which of the parts should I avoid and which are the good bits? So they'll tell you things. The other thing as well that you can find is other members of a power team. Look, you're going to need tradespeople when you buy your investment because ideally you're going to look at something that you can add value to increase your return on investment. So you're going to need a build team or tradespeople to work with. So that's the ideal time to find these people is when you're on your visits. Yes, you can look up on Yell.com or whatever, but do you really know anything about those people? Whereas if you
mm,
speak to a letting agent within an area or an estate agent, they may have recommendations of tradespeople, and you might even spot these people as you're walking. Here's another tip: is to walk around your investment area as well, rather than driving, so you can really see. You can look in houses and see, or you can look down the backs of houses and see, well, most of these houses have extended at the back. Maybe that's a thing that people want around here. That's what's in demand. You can get to see whether people typically have blinds or curtains in the house. There's all sorts you can find by walking around, and you might bump into a builder that's on a refurb job, and you can have a good chat. And there you've got somebody to work with.
And I was just going to say, thinking again as a new investor, how do I speak to these tradespeople? Do I call them up? Do I just approach them? Um, you know, it's often quite a scary sort of scenario. Well, will they mind if I talk to them? Is something that comes up. So, have you any tips on approaching tradesmen in the area as you're wandering around, as you're walking around and
It can be
um,
scary and daunting, of course, if you've
mm,
never dealt with tradespeople before. We always suggest getting recommendations. So prior to your visit, you may have even spoken to other people, or Asset Academy students, to find out who else is investing in the area. Can't
mhm,
beat a recommendation from somebody that's already using a tradesperson. But builders, they're always, yes, they're in high demand, and a good builder will always be busy. But once a job's finished, they always need another job to go to. So they should a good builder will always be more than happy to speak to you. If not, then it's not the right builder. And I think, in my experience, I've come across builders on doing work before, and as long as they're usually quite amenable to at least give you a business card, have a chat, and say, "Yeah, we'll be happy to have a talk." And occasionally, you could say, "Look, It looks like you're doing quite a big refurb job here. Do you mind if I just poke my head in and have a look and see what you're doing? And they may
To
well
actually
be
go into the house
into the house,
that
and
they're
you can
working on,
see how
yeah.
they're working. Yeah, yeah. A good builder will always be open to new business. That's for sure.
Yeah, and of course, when you're in there, you can see how they work. Yeah, is it chaos? Is it messy? Is it really
Organised. Yeah.
efficiently organised? All that sort of thing.
And you
Yeah,
can ask if they work within the rental sector as well, because there are different types of builders, and a lot of builders will work on privately owned family homes where they'll do high
mm,
end jobs and charge a lot. Everything's got to be absolutely perfect. So it's good to check. Do you work in the rental sector? Have you done work on rental properties for landlords before, letting agents? And
mm,
they're really quite good because they understand what your requirements will be as well.
mm. And as you work more with them, of course, they'll know your spec and what you're expecting as well, in terms of finish and fixtures and fittings and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, everything gets easier the further you go, doesn't it? So yeah, once
Yeah.
the builders work with you and done a couple of jobs, then you can simply say, "Mr. Builder, same again."
And that's a interesting or a key point you just said there. The first steps are always the hardest. So finding this area might seem daunting at the very beginning, but if we break it down into sizable chunks,
Yes.
then it becomes easier. And that's why we've sort of done this today, in that we've looked so far. That doesn't look so far, rather than looking at the whole country and going, well, I can't decide, I can't do this.
Yeah.
So let's just recap a bit then. So we've decided we sort of look on our doorstep first. If it doesn't work there, using some of the research avenues that we've discussed, we'll go a little bit further and a little bit further.
Yeah.
And it also depends on how much money we've got to spend, the supply of property in that area as well.
Yeah.
And then actually in the area, talking to people who live and work in that area. So there are estate agents, tradespeople, local business owners as well, from your convenience store and your corner shop and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. I've got a view, Simon, that this stage, you said before, there can be quite a lot of work in the research stage, but it's really worth doing because you've got to get this bit right. If you get all of this bit right, then you don't have to do it again. You're away on your investment journey. But if you skip over things and miss things out, and you start to invest in an area on a hunch or just because it's convenient, then you might start to find that things don't work, and it's really tricky to unravel. So, yeah, for every hour spent researching online, you're probably going to save yourself a week of trial and error.
And research, key thing.
But once you've
So
done
we have
once you don't do too much, once you've done your research and you're happy and everything works and you've confirmed it, that's when we just get busy. Start to look at houses. Then, don't research forever.
So we've covered a lot of material in a relatively short space of time, and as I said at the beginning, this is something that you teach on the Asset Academy Teams training in detail over 2 and 3 sessions altogether.
That's
so. For anyone who wants to get involved in that, jump on our website, assetacademy.co.uk, and you can find out more about our trainings there. But for now, Steve, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
This has been brilliant. I know anybody listening will be will have cleared some fog, I think, for a number of people watching or listening to this. So thank you. And being as when we recorded this was sort of, I don't know, getting close to the end of this COVID pandemic. Hopefully, I'll see you in person in the future very soon.
I do hope so. Thank you very much, Simon. Really appreciate it.
So you can see there's loads more to learn about property investing, and guess what? These videos, they're all ready for you to learn even more. So click either one of these right now, and you can get some more information on how to grow your portfolio. Click the video. That one. Either one. Go on.